Welcome back to another episode of the Gen Future Podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Luis Duque. I have Nikolai here with me again. We'll be talking about goal setting a little bit. And I think at the beginning of the year, it's a time where many people are thinking about goals. And I personally, and many people have that listen to this podcast probably have heard SMART goals. But I recently was reading a book that was talking about clear goals and was a little different than kind of the SMART goal approach that we have all know and learn and hear everywhere. So I think we wanted to just have a little discussion on that. I think Nikolai, you're telling me that you haven't really heard about clear goals before. So I'm excited to see what you think and have a comparison between SMART goal, which I know you use quite a bit, and maybe other goal setting approaches. But um, yeah, how are you doing today? And this is the first time we actually recorded in a long, long time. So I'm excited for this.
Yeah, definitely since before the holidays. So it's good to be back. I'm excited to learn something new. I didn't know about clear goals before you brought it up. And as I discussed with you before too, that everybody has kind of their own style, and SMART goals might be turn some people away. I think we have friends who have mentioned that to us before. So it's really good to keep learning new options and ways of doing these things, because you got to find out what's going to work best for you.
Mhm.
I know we're going to dive into some of it, and I literally have had 2 minutes of clear goal research on this. So I'm very excited to listen to you and hear what you heard, and see how we can kind of see the comparisons between the SMART goals and the clear goals, or what other systems we want to talk about. And it's going to be a fun conversation.
Yeah, and I think let's just start basically with a basic definition of each of them. You're probably more well versed in SMART goals, but those are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Um, you want to go just give it a quick description on those, and I think we'll go from there. I have a few thoughts on SMART goals, but we'll save those for a little later.
Yeah, so I think when it comes to SMART goals, it's really just to help people get a clearer picture of what they want to do, or how they're going to do it. So instead of saying, "I want to find a new job," or "I'm gonna make $50,000 this year," well, most people don't even say that. They just say, "I want to make more money this year."
Mhm.
It's like those are great thoughts, they're great ideas, um, but it's just a goal without a timeline is kind of a dream type of thing.
Mhm.
How much money do you want to make? So let's get really specific. So for me, the SMART goal is a framework of really writing down that SMART goal. Like, that's measurable. You want to have a number associated with it. Can't be off the walls, totally unachievable. I mean, that's not inspiring to go after any goal that you can never achieve. And then the relevance to me is a lot of people, and this is something I've kind of seen over years of working with young professionals. A lot of their goals are driven by other people, whether it's their parents or something maybe they see a friend doing and they just kind of mimic that, but it's not relevant to them. It's not inspiring to them. It's not motivating to them. So you have to really make it relevant to you, and it has to be for you only.
Mhm.
So that's kind of how I've seen these SMART goals really play out and really help kind of create and then shape how we write down what the actual goal is.
Yeah, and I think that's important to note as well. Is I think SMART goals have their place and they're important if you're, let's say, a project manager and it is a project that has a very kind of well structured timeline. You have different milestones that you can meet along the way. It's very specific. You have kind of a well structured path forward. Um, I found that when you apply SMART goals to everything, and I've heard this from many people that you need to apply SMART goals to every goal in your life. I think that's when you start running into the issues of how do I even fit this goal that is maybe not specific. There's no really way to measure it right now. There's not really a timeline. How do you fit those kind of goals into a little box that are SMART goals for a specific type of goals? So when I read this book, it's called Feel Good Productivity by Ali Abdaal. It's a new book that came out this year talking about clear goals. I was like, wait a minute, this is a little more flexible, and I think this could apply to all the areas of my life. um, Family, for example, personal development. There's areas where I don't need to have a specific timeline, a constraint that is so tight that it's gonna keep me motivated. I think there's a little more give into what can happen and understand what's going on there. So let's go through those. So clear goals are collaborative, limited, emotional, appreciable, and refinable. So collaborative, it's you can apply it to teams, but it's more of I'm looking around and I'm looking at different people, how they do things. I follow people on social media, read books, and get input from many sources. Limited is it shouldn't is basically like the scope of work if you're thinking of an engineering project. So you're not trying to do everything, but you're trying to limit the scope of work into a smaller category. Emotional is it something that drives you emotionally? Is it something that you really want to do? Is it something that is kind of pushing your boundaries, but at the same time you kind of feel connected to it? Appreciable, it's basically narrowing down again that scope and breaking it in different phases, if you will. So let's say a workout program, it may be 12 weeks, but I know the first phase is 2 weeks. So I'm thinking about those 2 weeks right now, and then I move on. So for me, the bigger timelines have always been a struggle. So breaking it down into those smaller timelines seems to work better for me. And I think the biggest one is here, the last one, refinable. For me, if you don't adjust those goals and if you have a set goal and you kind of follow it through the end, there's going to be things that happen in between that are going to be a little more challenging to follow through. So the last step into, hey, things happen, I'm going to switch and progress into this project, and as I gain insight into what I'm doing or the feedback I'm getting from others, I'm going to start adjusting it and start to maybe change the goal a little bit, but at the same time keeping the same framework and the same things that I'm doing, but adjusting to the feedback I'm getting.
I actually really like that last one. When I talk to people about goals, we always want to be writing these down in pencil because they need to be able to be revised as needed. One other thing that a very common challenge that people run into when they're creating goals is they create amazing goals if they were to be the only goal that they're going after. But most of the time they're doing three to five, or really should not be doing more than five. But we get up to seven sometimes, and uh, they're great if they were the only thing you focused on. But then you have to figure out, how am I actually going to do all of these at once? Now, I only recommend to do three at the same time, but even that sometimes can be too much the way that they've written the goal the first way. So they need to be changeable, or maybe pause while you focus on one of them hardcore and then come back to. So I definitely relate to the refinement part of this clear goal process.
Yeah, and I think that's. I mean, I think we talked about this before. We've done a one or two episodes on goal setting before, but to me, just that aspect of getting feedback, and I think a lot of people just again think about the goal and say, "I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna focus on it until I complete the goal." Having that feedback loop in terms of, "Hey, I'm things happen this week that I'm not gonna be able to complete the goal if it was a weekly goal or it's gonna maybe throw me a little bit off track." Knowing that that's okay for certain goals, it's it's something that is valuable. And I think again, for sometimes project deliverables are not as flexible and you need to really push through it. But there's certain goals like personal development, like what's really the timeline for that? It doesn't have a timeline, and it's hard to define what specific month I'm going to finish my professional development or my personal development. So that's kind of where clear goals may be better suited. But if I'm talking about maybe a fitness goal, a smart goal could be a good idea if you're trying to achieve something. But if you're just trying to get healthy, and obviously with healthy habits come better weight management, muscle growth, and etc. health benefits. But if you're not targeting a specific like fat percentage or a specific like weight, does it really make sense to set a smart goal versus a clear goal? So um, yeah, it's kind of a new approach that I think I'm gonna start implementing a little more in how I set goals, especially those kind of goals that maybe outside work mainly, and have a different maybe perspective and mindset, the way I see it, basically.
You know, yeah, you touched on something there, and it just kind of brought to my mind about, the ones that are difficult to get clear on, like the development, personal development. Sometimes I will use these SMART goals to just help me create a habit, and in that case, I don't necessarily have the exact result of my personal development that I want. But I know that if I read 40 books this year is going to get me closer to kind of this obscure thing that I have out there. So, I've used SMART goals that sense, but I still, I kind of like this clear goal idea because sometimes it can feel too rigid on, I have to read 40 books, I have to read 40 books, and without kind of the clearness of what am I actually trying to achieve of reading these 40 books, so that was something I liked that you said. The other thing is, kind of jumping into the limitations piece of this. Um, when I'm doing SMART goals, one of the processes that I do when I'm preparing my goals is to sit back and think, okay, this is what I want. What do I currently have?
Mhm.
What is my current situation? I have to really dive into what are the tools that I have and what are the tools that I need to do all of this. So it's kind of looking at some of these uh, limitations already, but it's not defined necessarily in the SMART acronym. It's
Mhm.
just the additional steps that we need to take. So when you have the L or the limitations in here with the process itself, I think I think that's really cool to help kind of refine and adjust the game plan forward on how you're going to get those outcomes.
Yeah, and again, these kind of have two different. I see that as two different purposes. I really like the idea of using kind of the SMART goals, maybe as you're trying to develop a habit. So you're maybe a little more rigid and are maybe keeping track of your progress a little closer. You have again, a specific timeline. I want to develop this goal in or this habit in the next 3 months. You have a timeline, you have the things that you want to do, maybe every day, every week, whatever it is, or the number of times. So it's very measurable, is specific. This is the one habit I'm going to be doing. You have a kind of emotional connection, a purpose, if you will. So I like that idea, and maybe that's a good way to kind of jump into like the next part of what I want to talk about is just kind of the examples of smart goals and clear goals. Is there any examples that you can think of for smart goals in maybe like your career that you have um, developed and maybe achieve, and how you approached it at the beginning? I think it will be interesting to hear if anything changed as you were going through it, and maybe the final outcome, if you remember.
Sure. Oh man, that's a very loaded question. I mean, I could, I'll have to see how I reduce this down to a minute. I think the biggest goal that I've ever really accomplished using the SMART goals was paying off the debt.
Mhm.
And anybody who's kind of followed my story or read anything that I've just written or discussed before, personal finance is such a big one for me. It like literally changed my life when I was able to accomplish paying off my debt. And it started off with just we want to pay off our debt. We want to pay off our credit cards, our student loans, and our car loans. It kind of just started off with that. But then it was such a big number. I mean, $149,000 is a really big number. And it's just, how the heck are we going to do this? And so using SMART goals, we had the kind of the overall goal of $149,000. We knew that we wanted to pay it off as quickly as possible, but then we had to step back and see, okay, well, what's reasonable? At the time I was making like 60 or $70,000. So it was a very uphill battle on that. So we had to kind of get realistic on that. It was very relevant to us because we were tired of paying so much minimum payments every single month. So we set the timeline. We knew it was already relevant, achievable. It didn't feel achievable. So one thing that we did was we kind of broke it up. So goal 1B was pay off $10,000 in the next 6 months, right? And then we would keep kind of doing these little baby steps because we knew those baby steps would kind of get us to the overall one. So that's how we kind of or how that's how we handled the achievable part of the SMART goal. Obviously measurable. We were able to kind of track, all right, how what do we pay off this month or this week? And so we were able to measure it, and it was very specific. So for me, the I would say that that was probably the best use of the biggest impact on how we use the SMART goals, and the thing that I was most excited to see how the SMART goal system works for us.
Yeah, and that's a great example. And I think that as you were talking about it, you were kind of being very intentional in the way you were kind of setting up maybe that goal. Like it seemed like a huge goal at the beginning, and I think that's something where people struggle a lot is kind of starting and seeing, hey, I want to pay $120,000 in debt. How do I even tackle that? What is my
Yeah,
first step? So breaking those into like maybe like you say is goal 1B or 1C and kind of different milestones. And I think if I remember correctly from our conversation, you were kind of celebrating those milestones as you were going, which I think
we did.
it's important because if you just celebrate at the end, it seems so far out that it's going to be really hard to um, stay motivated through that whole
Yeah.
process.
Yeah, I think if your goal is going to end up being longer than a few months, you have to have little milestone celebrations. But I would actually be interested. What if we sorry, and I don't want to hijack your plan for this, but what if we took that paying off debt goal and run through the clear goal framework and how we would accomplish that? Is that okay?
Yeah, let's do it because I think there's a lot of similarities between the two, um,
Sure.
and I think they can complement each other. Like I think there's goals that certainly fit within that smart goal category, and maybe that clear goal category. But I think it could be like a smart goal set for the year. Here are the things we want to do in the whole year, but then you have clear goals for each quarter that you can adjust and gives you those kind of milestones in between to get to that final
Yeah.
goal. So yeah, let's do it. I love this.
All right. So clear, we have collaboration, right? So we're identifying potential partners and resources that may be necessary. So, when we're going through the SMART goal, we're saying what we want, but we're not really getting very clear on how are we actually going to do this. So, writing down a list of people who could be accountability partners for us would have been part of it. Seeking out a class, or writing down a class that we could take, or writing down a mentor that has gone through this before that we could reach out to, ask them. You really just kind of find how are we going to support ourselves uh, using people or resources that might be helpful to help us get to the success. That's how I see the collaboration. Is there anything else that you would see or add to that with this?
I mean, again, you didn't do this alone. You had your wife kind of next to you, helping and doing
Yeah,
all of that. So that's a great collaboration point there as well. Just the two of you seeking input from others, seeking input from each other, and kind of keep the two of you motivated as you went through it.
yeah, yeah. Okay, so then L, limitations. Right?
Hmm.
So how are we going to keep the goal manageable and achievable? I think that's kind of what we did with, 149,000 just felt too big.
Yeah.
So we kind of made it more manageable by breaking it up. Uh, we did kind of set a timeline, but we didn't really. I mean, we had kind of a dream timeline. As soon as possible is not a timeline. You need to say in 1 year or 3 years, right? Uh, so that's how we kind of identified what's realistic, and we threw a realistic timeline on there. But I think we're already jumping the gun here on refinement. We kind of knew that had to be uh, being able to be revised, because we just didn't know at the beginning. It was going to have to be changed throughout. And then we had to set budgets, and we had to kind of set other little guardrails on our own personal lives to help us get to this overall goal of paying off this debt. So that's kind of how I see this limitation. What other
Yeah.
limitation things would you could think of for this goal?
Um, I think that's pretty good. I was thinking, and again, maybe this is into the refinement aspect of it too, but I've started to set kind of lower bound and upper bound kind of goals in terms of within this. So my ideal, my upper bound, perfect week, nothing breaks in the house, no one gets sick and have to be spend a night in the hospital, or work is manageable. I don't have any additional stress. I want to go work out 5 days a week, and that's kind of my goal. But I know there are weeks that things happen, things go crazy in the house, work is get super busy. I have a few late nights or whatever. So my lower bound is going to be 3 times a week. So no matter what, I want to go at least 3 times a week. That way, if I don't go meet the 5 days a week goal, I still feel like I accomplished what I set out to do, which was 3 days a week. For you guys, I think
Yeah.
was probably something similar. There were months that maybe you wanted to spend a little more time with family and travel a little bit. You wanted to, maybe you were extra tired from work and wanted to eat out a couple days in the week, and maybe you didn't make the full amount of payments you wanted during that month, but you made a payment that get you closer to that goal.
Yeah. If we got tired of ramen soup and wanted to get Taco Bell or something.
Yeah, something like that.
I love the upper bound and lower bound idea. So years ago, this guy named Ever was in my class, and he kind of had a little bit of a difficulty with the setting a number, right? Because it's sometimes it's life happens, life changes, or life gets in the way, or some you can't control everything. And so he was kind of talking it through with the group, and he was mentioning like, what if we had the lower bound and he called it a quota, like as long as he met this, he was good, and then if he achieved anything higher than that, that was great. He still was very specific on the upper bound part of it, but he kind of labeled the lower bound as just kind of like the quota, the bare minimum that he needs to sell or do to meet that goal or to make it feel successful. So I
Yeah.
love that idea. All right, so then you want to jump into E? You got to remind me what E is.
Emotional. So
Thank
obviously
you.
a big emotional motivation. I mean, if you translate to the SMART goals as well, but it's more on the emotional. I think you had a pretty strong emotional desire to pay all this debt.
We had a lot of emotional desire to pay off this debt. I mean, the flip side, and so I don't know if we necessarily took this into account, and then maybe it's just easier looking back on it. I don't think we took into account necessarily the emotions of not paying off the debt. Like we knew the emotions were going to be so great when we completed it, but we did not necessarily sit and reflect on how the emotions were going to hold us back and limit us even. Like it was tough. We felt so much weight on us
Mhm.
that sometimes we would just feel lethargic, and it was really hard. So I think writing even the emotions down would have been smart, like to make it a human thing, like we are still humans going after this goal. We're emotional beings, and don't hide it and don't try to suppress it. Just get it all out there. I love this emotions idea to throw that into your clear goals.
Yeah, and let's. I mean, we can probably do a whole episode on this, but on my wife is working on a research marketing company. So they do like messaging for pharma and other companies as well. And they use what's called heuristics. So the emotional behavior of people to basically give them an emotion. So a message could be negative, positive, and they do kind of research in terms of like which emotion drives the more either sales for this company or authority within that. So thinking about those heuristics, I may need to do that episode with her because I think it's super interesting. I've been doing a little reading on that as well. But sometimes the reward is great, keeps you motivated, but the fear of maybe something bad happening if you don't accomplish that could be a bigger motivation than something positive happening from doing that. So, as you were saying, maybe paying out the debt it wasn't like it was impacting your life right now, but it wasn't like catastrophic. You were not like on the street, and if you didn't pay these in the next 6 months, something bad was going to happen. But it could have been readjusted in terms of like having that negative. Like, I really, really like to travel, but if I don't pay this down, I'm just not gonna be able to travel because I cannot afford it. Um,
Yeah.
so that's something that came to mind as you were talking about that, and I think it's a interesting topic to explore in the future.
Yeah, we should definitely jump into that. I would love to listen to the episode already. So All right, so A, appreciation. This is the celebration, if I remember. Uh,
It is
I
appreciable,
mean,
so that means narrowing down the scope. So what you're talking about, your
oh,
bigger goal was 140,000, but then you just broke it down into maybe smaller chunks and started doing it maybe in
there we go.
smaller,
Okay,
more. Maybe the word is not the greatest, but again, whoever developed it was trying to get that word that is catchy. But yeah, just kind of
okay,
breaking it down into like these smaller, maybe smaller milestones as you go.
got it. Yeah, I think one thing to remember is make sure that the reward is proportionally correct. You know, if we paid off $1,000 of debt and then we go buy a $500 gift, that's not necessarily the thing. Um, I have a friend who has shared with me that she has some pretty big career goals,
Mhm.
and every single time she has achieved it, she goes and buys like a really nice purse. And I thought a really nice purse was like 200-300 bucks, but I think she told me hers was like 3 grand.
Yeah.
And I thought, hey, you know what? That is awesome. But actually, when we talk about her career achievements, uh, that is totally proportionally correct.
Mhm.
It's appropriate for the things that the size of goals that she is accomplishing. So that's just something to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, that's a great story, and uh, the way I think of it as well is, I mean, you are very financially savvy and love talking about that, but I think that's kind of why I didn't use percentages in terms of when I'm sharing like tips in terms of like, hey, save 10%, because if you say save $10,000 for someone that is making maybe 100 or $150,000 a year, that seems like impossible because that's basically all their money they're making. But if someone is
Yeah.
making $1 million, that seems like a drop in the bucket. So percentages are always great to discuss that as well. And I think we try to, especially when we're looking at our finances, and again, long story for a different episode, but thinking about the percentages that each of those buckets cover and making sure we're staying below those percentages help us as we start earning more, we get bonuses or life happens, we're still within those limits that we set to ourselves and can adjust as we go up in income and career changes and everything.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely good to keep in mind. As we've been going through this process of kind of comparing my old SMART goal to this clear goal framework, this refinement really has just been in my mind because I keep thinking how much better this experience of paying off our debt would have gone if I had this refinement piece to it.
Mhm.
So again, part of our story was we had our first son, Jackson, a couple like 2.5 years into our paying off debt. It took us 3.5 years to do it. Um, and I was so rigid on no, we set that we're going to pay this money off by this date. And I just kept running and working my butt off and working 80-hour weeks and mowing other people's lawns. Like I did not stop. I was so rigid on this goal, and my wife was like, "We just had a baby. We got to refine. We got to make things. We got to just chill for a little bit." But I just kept going. But if I had thought, I mean, it caused a lot of problems, and it took months to even figure out what the problem was because she paused, I kept going, and we were not on the same page.
Mhm.
So if we had kind of built in some refinement or refinement parameters or identified what are some of these things that are going to come and potentially derail us along the way and how are we going to handle them together, that would have saved a lot of headache and heartache and everything. So yeah, I think that refinement piece really is very key on this. Any other thoughts on that?
No, I think that's absolutely true. And again, like we have talked before, I struggle a lot with just rigid goals because I've been like being like really diagnosed with ADHD, but I'm pretty sure I have some aspects of it. And something that I struggle with is the habit of, hey, I'm gonna do this every day, every single day, no matter what, or this is the timeline, this is what I need to do. Because at some point I either get bored of what I'm doing or I need to just change course and pursue something different. So that refinement allows me to uh, find the path where I am most interested right now. So coming back to maybe the workout, or we can talk about the podcast as well. At the beginning, the goal was something, and if I had set it and say, "Hey, I want to follow this goal to the end," I probably will have just quit immediately because I will have got bored if I was talking about the same things at the beginning that I was talking at the beginning. So refining and changing and maybe getting a new microphone really sparks new life into me recording a podcast or interviewing a guest that I haven't talked before, exploring a topic that maybe is a little outside of that um, topic environment that maybe I was focusing on too much has been interesting. I think we have touched on different topics and things have changed a lot since I started this. So refining, I think it's very important as we continue to improve this and explore new ideas and stuff like that. So I think, like you said, is a really key and a combination of that refinement aspect and the upper and lower bound that we're talking about before. I think that's what has helped me really identify better goals. And not only that, but just stick to them a little better.
Yeah. No, I think this has been really, really good to hear this and learn this new process. I do want to just say real quick before we wrap up, though, is I think there truly is a time and place for rigid
Hmm.
goals.
Yeah.
I really do think that there are some goals that need to be rigid, or other things will hurt or fall under the cracks or whatever it might be. There is a time and place for them, but I do like to hear this new idea of clear goals, or at least new to me, because there's always ways that we can apply different things in different ways, and people are different too, like we just discussed at the beginning. So this has been great. I appreciated you teaching me about clear goals, and it was fun to kind of go through and compare the two. So thanks for letting me jump onto that.
Yeah. And I think that's it's an important point, like you were mentioning at the end, is clear goals and smart goals are just two frameworks that we can use to plan for goals or whatever you want to call it, goal setting. There are probably 5, 10 more that we're not even aware of, a combination
Oh
of the
yeah.
two. So I think the important part here is here are some that have worked for me, have worked for you, have worked in a combination of smart and clear goals. Even if we hadn't really set them in that way, we're kind of dipping our toes in both of them. But the important part is, again, the aspect of goal setting is challenging. But if you focus on setting those goals and have a clear path forward, I think that's when you start seeing the biggest impact in your career, in your life. And if you combine smart goals, maybe for the longer term, maybe a year time frame, but then you have the intermediate timeline and the refinement portion of it. So it's more like a smart plus clear goal that can be combined throughout the year instead of just focusing on one and maybe get discouraged if you don't achieve those milestones as you go. So again, there's many ways to set goals, but I think those are kind of two examples, and maybe a combination of the two is it's a better way to do it. Do you have any final thoughts or anything that you want to share, Nikolai?
No, no, I'm good. It's good to get back in the swing of things, and look forward to the next one.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much, and we'll chat in the next one. I'm excited to continue exploring these kind of topics and some new ones in the future. If you really enjoyed this episode of the New Future Podcast, you're gonna love the content we have over our website at luisfelipeduque.com. You can find the link in the description of this episode as well as the show notes at luisfelipeduque.com/podcast. Every episode comes packed with a lot of links, a lot of information. So you can find all the show notes and all the information related to this episode over at luisfelipeduque.com/podcast. Thank you so much for coming back to this episode. Thank you, Jack Winters, for the music. And as always, let's continue engineering our future.